You're sitting in the passenger seat, or maybe you're the one driving, and a massive freight truck thunders past in the next lane. And then you catch it. One of the axles, tires mounted, everything in place, just hovering, not making contact, not doing anything, just riding along above the pavement like it forgot it had a job. Is something wrong with it? Did the driver not notice? Why would you engineer a truck that carries an axle it doesn't even use? And why does the same model of truck sometimes have every tire down and sometimes not? You've rolled past that floating axle more times than you can count and never had a word for it. Just filed it away as one of those things trucks do. Here's what's actually happening. That axle isn't malfunctioning. It's doing exactly what it was built to do. And once you understand the logic behind it, every heavy truck you pass for the rest of your life is going to look completely different. What is a lift axle? The axle has an official name, a lift axle. Depending on its position along the underside of the truck, you might also hear it called a tag axle or a pusher axle. What all three names describe is the same thing, an extra axle the driver can raise or lower from inside the cab using a single switch. Picture a folding workbench. Legs extended, it holds weight. Legs folded, it takes up less space and stops getting in the way. The lift axle works on the same principle. It isn't a flaw in the design, it's the design. But that still leaves the obvious question: why would you ever want fewer tires touching the road? Here's the assumption you're probably carrying. More contact with the ground means more stability, which means better performance across the board. A raised axle looks like something unfinished, or worse, something broken. But that assumption only holds if you think about a truck at full load, which is only half of what a truck actually does. Why raise it when empty? Every loaded truck eventually becomes an empty truck. The freight gets delivered, the drum empties, the bed clears, and on that return run, those extra axles aren't helping. They're costing. Imagine sliding a heavy book across a desk with one finger versus pressing your whole forearm flat against it. The forearm creates far more resistance against the surface. That's the same physics at work when an empty truck rolls with every axle down. Each unnecessary tire drags against dry pavement, forcing the engine to work harder for zero payload benefit. Fuel consumption climbs. Rubber wears down on asphalt it has no reason to touch. Across thousands of empty miles a year, that friction translates into a number that shows up on a spreadsheet and makes fleet managers very uncomfortable. So the driver raises the axle, drag drops, efficiency returns. But that's only the first half of the story. And the second half is the reason this system exists at all. How does road law work? Roads aren't designed to handle how heavy a truck is overall. They're designed to handle how much force presses down on any single axle at once. In the US, that threshold is roughly 20,000 pounds per axle, close to the combined weight of two large SUVs pressing into one point of road surface every single time the truck rolls over it. Now multiply that by every truck on every highway every hour of every day. Pavement develops stress fractures. Bridge structures absorb loads they weren't calculated to handle. The deterioration isn't sudden. It compounds quietly and costs billions to fix. The solution engineers landed on was weight distribution. Set a glass of water on a single chopstick, and it tips immediately. Set that same glass across 3 chopsticks spread evenly, and it balances. The road functions identically. More axles down means the total weight divides across more contact points, reducing what any one spot has to absorb. A fully loaded truck lowers its lift axle to stay within legal per-axle limits. Once the load is gone, that axle contributes nothing except friction and wear, so up it goes. One switch. 2 completely different operational states, both entirely deliberate. Here's the part most people never stop to think about. Not every axle on a truck is doing the same job. The drive axle is always on the ground and it connects directly to the engine and is physically responsible for moving the truck. The dead axle is always on the ground too, but it has no power source. It's load-bearing structure, nothing more. And then there's the lift axle, unpowered like the dead axle, but uniquely capable of retracting when the workload no longer justifies its presence. Drive axles generate motion. Dead axles absorb load. Lift axles are the only ones that get to decide when they're done. That separation of roles didn't happen by coincidence. Why did this get invented? In the late 1950s, America's interstate highway network was being constructed at a pace that outran everyone's projections. Trucks were scaling up. Roads that had just been paved were already showing stress damage. By the time the 1960s turned into the 1970s, states were enforcing per-axle weight limits, and trucking companies were eating fines at weigh stations. The legal way to haul a heavier load was to spread it across more axles, but those same extra axles became a liability the moment the truck ran empty. The lift axle solved both problems at once. Whether it was driven primarily by tyre wear costs or weigh station compliance probably depends on who you ask. But money and regulation were pointing at the same answer at the same time, and the industry followed. Where have you seen this? You've been passing this system on the road your entire life. The concrete mixer that just emptied its drum at the job site. Watch its rear axle as it pulls away. The garbage truck making its rounds every week starts the morning riding high and rides lower by the time it reaches your street. The dump truck shuttling between a quarry and a construction site near you is running two completely different axle configurations in the same shift. The tanker truck you overtook on the highway was actively adjusting for weight compliance as it crossed state lines. Every single one of those vehicles has been showing you the same floating axle. You just didn't have a name for it until right now. What are its real limits? The system has real constraints worth knowing. Hydraulic components wear and need regular attention. A driver who lifts the axle before the load actually justifies it ends up illegally concentrating weight on the remaining axles. Regulators in various states have written specific rules about when lift axles can legally go up, because the potential for abuse at weigh stations became obvious quickly. Newer trucks are handling this with real-time load sensors that take the decision out of the driver's hands entirely. The system reads the weight and adjusts automatically. The technology is cleaner now. The underlying logic is exactly the same as it's always been. That floating axle you've been noticing all these years isn't a malfunction or an oversight. Every time you see it raised, a driver made a conscious call, balancing fuel cost, road law, tyre life, and payload weight with a single switch. From this moment on, every time that image crosses your path, you'll know exactly what you're looking at. If there's something you walk past every day and wonder about, drop it in the comments. We read every single one, and the best suggestions make it into future videos. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.